If you're looking to buy a stacked NBA 2K account with max badges and more, visit sportstmb.com. He has been in the community for years and has hundreds of reviews. Click the first link in the description to get your account today.
Kevin Durant is perhaps the most controversial superstar in the NBA today. If not him, then obviously James Harden. After his free agency decision in 2016, he went from the NBA's golden boy to a Golden State Warrior. Some wordplay for you. And with that decision, KD lost a lot of respect from NBA fans, and then after Durant won some championships, he was promptly given zero credit for those championships despite having some all-time performances, and elevating the Warriors from a great team to an unbeatable one. Not saying he necessarily deserves a ton of credit for winning those rings, but he also wasn't just along for the ride. With the overall hostility around Kevin Durant, I feel like a lot of people just dismiss his career as a whole ever since his 2016 next chapter. But Durant, before having left OKC, despite not having won a championship yet, had a very good-looking career. His career in Oklahoma City might have been underwhelming for the potential that it had, though you could say that for the Oklahoma City Thunder franchise in general. He still had a great 9 years there that are worth being remembered, and at the very peak of his career in OKC, he won an MVP that unfortunately seems to have been forgotten about outside of the "you're the real MVP" memes that actually came from a very powerful and heartfelt speech. When we look over the past few MVPs in NBA history, and especially through the last decade, I feel like this one gets really overlooked. So let's look at Kevin Durant's 2014 MVP season and talk about why I feel it is one of the most underrated MVP seasons of the decade.
Absolutely incredibly with the acrobatic alley-oop.
Up until 2014, Durant had already been building what was clearly going to be a Hall of Fame career. He'd established himself as one of the greatest scorers to ever live. He led the league in scoring for 3 consecutive seasons, and then after he was done averaging the most points in the NBA, he decided, oh, I'll start averaging 28 points per game still, but I'll do it on 50-40-90 shooting. Kevin Durant was a nearly 7 foot tall, if not 7 foot tall player who played like a 2 guard, which made him one of the most unstoppable and still one of the most unstoppable players in NBA history. I have no idea how to word the rest of this video because I have to talk in the past tense, but also Kevin Durant is still playing / not dead, so I don't know. But KD was one of the best players in the NBA, considered by most at the time to be the second best behind LeBron. As a matter of fact, Durant said a few times during this season that he was tired of being second. He unfortunately had a hell of an act to follow in 2014 because in 2013, LeBron James had potentially the greatest individual season of all time, where he put up 27, 8, and 7 on 56% shooting from the field and a career-high 40% from 3, and he put up a Defensive Player of the Year bid while making it all look effortless. And while Durant definitely did not match the insanity of LeBron James's 2013 MVP, he definitely put up a damn good season. He put up a career-high 32 points per game, and he did so with nearly 50-40-90 shooting splits, only being 1% off from shooting 40% from 3 and 2.7% off from shooting 90% from the free throw line. So Durant was basically the best he had ever been offensively this year, especially when you consider the fact that for most of this season, Russell Westbrook didn't even play. Now, I have been pretty critical of Russell Westbrook pretty much ever since I've started this channel. But there is definitely no denying that Russell Westbrook was an essential part of OKC's formula. Undoubtedly, he was important for OKC and he missed half the year. But that was no problem for Kevin Durant, who in the biggest stretch of games where Russ did not play, which was 26 games, Durant put up 35 points per game, 7.5 rebounds, and 6.5 assists while shooting 53% from the field and 40% from 3. The absence of Russell Westbrook made this upcoming season look like it would be a wash. The Thunder had made the Finals just 2 years prior off of the backs of Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook, and then the following year they won 60 games with Durant leading the league in scoring and Russ doing great at playing second fiddle. So with Russ out of the equation, as good as Durant was, many people did not think OKC would win any more than 50 games. But yet, Durant put this team on his back and got them to 59 wins. And when you go down this OKC roster, that accomplishment seems even more significant. Because when you scroll down the names on this roster, after you get past Durant and Westbrook, you have a couple of okay players and then a bunch of bums. I'd argue that Serge Ibaka, outside of those top two, was the only player on this roster that was a top 100 player in the league at the time, and even then he was towards the bottom of the top 100. Really good defensive player. He averaged 2.7 blocks a game that year, which is why he had the nickname Serge Ibaka, and this season he contributed a career high in points with 15 a game because he really had to, playing in the pick and roll and shooting mid-range jumpers. Outside of KD, there were very limited offensive options. And then up next, OKC's 2011 draft pick, Reggie Jackson, ended up stepping up in the absence of Russell Westbrook. After getting less than 1,000 minutes last season, Reggie now found himself playing 28 minutes a game for the whole year, and he managed to make the most of those minutes. He averaged 13 points, 4 rebounds, and 4 assists, shooting 44% from the field, and then after shooting in the mid to low 20s on his three-pointers in his rookie and sophomore seasons, he shot 34% from 3-on-3 attempts per game, which still isn't good, but it was definitely a step up from what he normally brought. And Reggie was a good defensive player as well, which helped with OKC's defensive identity. And then after Reggie and Serge, no one on this team was putting up double-digit scoring numbers. Caron Butler, whose career was building towards a close at this point, averaged 9.7 points per game, and he did so shooting 44% from downtown, but that was only in 22 games. Jeremy Lamb shot okay from 3. Thabo Sefolosha was a really good defensive player, but wasn't helping them at all offensively, pretty much like Andre Roberson. Derek Fisher, who at this point was 39 years old, shot well from 3, but that was literally all that he provided. And then there were guys like Nick Collison, Perry Jones, and Kendrick Perkins getting pretty consistent minutes. This roster was straight up trash. If we go back and look at Russell Westbrook's MVP season, the main argument for him winning that MVP, of course, after the knuckle-dragging crowd mentioned triple-doubles, was that he carried a trash team to an alright record. The difference here is that Kevin Durant brought OKC to a great record, not an alright one. Kevin Durant got them to a 59-23 record, which was good for the second seed in the West, just behind the San Antonio Spurs, who had 62 wins. For MVP Russ, he got them a 47-35 record, which was good for the 6th seed in the West. And yet, I feel like people talk about that 2017 MVP award way more, and many people would consider that award to be more impressive. I would argue that 32-7-5 on nearly 50-40-90 on a trash roster, leading them to a 59-win season, is more impressive than 32-10-10 on bad efficiency with a trash roster, leading to just 47 wins. I feel like that opinion should be unanimous. And yet, a not insignificant amount of people on this Twitter poll that I made gave it to Westbrook. The fact that it isn't 90+% in favor of KD shows how underrated his MVP year was. But moving past that, another important part of an MVP season is having MVP moments. Curry's game winner versus OKC was his. Westbrook had a game winner towards the end of the year versus the Nuggets, where he hit a 40-foot three-pointer. You can handpick whichever 50 or 60 bomb you want for James Harden. Durant had a 54-point game versus the Warriors where he lost. Kevin Durant had a 54-point game versus the Warriors where he shot 68%, and he had a 51-point game versus the Toronto Raptors where he ended the game with a deep three-pointer to give OKC the lead with 2 seconds left, and he also had 12 rebounds and 7 assists in that game. He had 40+ 13 times, including a 42-point bomb where he shot 70% and scored those 42 in just 31 minutes of action. Now, I wanted to talk about why this MVP seems to have been forgotten, and there are a few factors here, probably the main one being the one that I mentioned in the intro, and that was Durant going to the Warriors. Him instantly becoming the most hated player in the NBA probably prevented a lot of people from reminiscing on his MVP season. But I think the fact that Durant got a foot injury injury in the following year and only played 20-something games, and the fact that OKC ended up blowing a 3-1 lead really just led people to viewing that OKC tenure negatively, or just people forgetting about it. But I think the biggest factor would have to be how cut and dry that MVP award was, without him also having historic numbers. In 2016, Curry was the unanimous MVP, but he did that with something that we'd never seen before. For Westbrook, he had a historic individual performance, being the first guy to ever do triple-double since Oscar Robertson, and he also had a guy in James Harden who made the MVP race close. When we talk about MVPs after the fact, it tends to be guys who either had historic seasons and or had steep competition. Giannis had a tight race. Harden's MVP barely gets talked about, and it was 2 years ago, because it was not a close race, nor was it necessarily historic. Curry, historic. Curry, tight race with James Harden. LeBron, historic. LeBron not talked about much. Derrick Rose, historic because he won it at 22 years old. LeBron, not too talked about. Kobe's is not talked about much. Dirk was not talked about much. Steve Nash, both years it was close. When we reminisce about MVP awards, it tends to be either guys who put up historic numbers or had a really good tight MVP race that year. I can already tell that a few years from now, I'm going to be making the same video about James Harden's 2018 MVP campaign, because I already know that no one's going to be talking about that one down the line. But yeah, that's Kevin Durant's essentially forgotten about MVP award. The guy had an amazing season, and I felt like it merited some talking about. That's the end of this video. Please be sure to like and subscribe for more NBA content like this, and cue the outro music.